Hi, everybody. This is Steve Sabludowsky, publisher of BayouBuzz.com. And today we're going to be talking with Jim Brown. Uh, we're going to be talking about public policy and the impact of public policy upon the Louisiana economy and what can we expect with some of the things that are going on. What are some of the conflicts? Jim is, as many of y'all know, is a former Secretary of State for Louisiana, also insurance commissioner. In addition to that, he was a state senator, so he was in government for about 25 years. Good morning, Jim. How you doing today?
Just fine, Steve. Glad to join you and all your viewers and listeners involving these important public issues that we continue to debate both in the legislature. What happens on the national level affects us. And I'm looking forward to talking about a lot of them with you this morning.
Okay, great. So just looking to see whether or not we're live. It looks like we are. Um, so public policy, just in general, how important is public policy in general as it relates to, say, business in this state?
Steve, I think it's extremely important, and it's getting more and more so where maybe you didn't have an interest in policy, in politics, if you will, in the past, and it was more predictable in the past, if you will. Today, there's more uh, inclusiveness involving public policy debates that affect small businesses, large businesses. And you know, the mantra is, well, I don't want to mess with politics. Well, if you don't want to mess with politics, you've got to understand the fact that in this day and age, politics is going to mess with you. And so I guess the message is that to the average businessman or woman watching this program today, you've got to be aware of what's happening on the state level with the legislature, what new rules and regulations they put in, what happens on your local level with zoning restrictions and other decisions made by your city council, by the mayors, by your police juries. And now we're seeing what's happening on the national level with decisions from the Supreme Court, with issues that are coming through with the federal government, the Congress. You take on the national level, why should that affect me? Well, we've got a $3 trillion bill that looks like it's going to pass and be signed into law and implemented that does a huge amount of infrastructure development in a state like Louisiana. We're going to get hundreds of millions of dollars here. That's fine. We'd like to have the money. But how does that impact each one of our viewers out there? If they have a business that's in the path of an interstate, it's going to cause you great disruption. If you're a small contractor, if you're a minority in the construction business, there's going to be more opportunities. So there are highs and lows as all of this legislation passes on the federal level and the state level that you got to be aware of. You've got to take an interest. You've got to monitor. I've got friends of mine who got businesses, consulting business, construction businesses say, well, I don't even read the newspaper anymore. Well, things are happening now that didn't happen some years back. And rapid decisions have to be made. And you've got to do some planning in advance. If you're interested in certain contracts, there are lots of others that are interested in those contracts. If you're interested in protecting your turf and not having some kind of a public uh, building or highway come to your area, there are others that want that to happen. So you've got to take more engagement, if you will, in public issues, I think, than back when I was in a public official back in the 90s and 10 years ago. There are just more happening and more decisions that affect every businessman and woman out there.
Would you attribute some of that to, actually, before I ask the question, uh, you can, people watching, you can comment below. We'll put your comment on the screen. So comment below or ask a question. We'd love to hear from you. Again, please comment below. We'd love to hear from you. So the question I have is whether or not you think it's due to technology that is an issue. And by the way, here we have a a comment from Barbara Bain. Barbara says, bear with me, she says, true. And also she says, great point. Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate it. So,
And Steve, I could
yeah.
say, Barbara represents a lot of the people we're talking about. She has been an insurance consultant for many, many years in the insurance business. That's a highly regulated industry. And knowing that Barbara has a company she represents and clients, she was very involved in saying, now, just what are these regulators going to do? What happened last year may change from this year in terms of financial requirements, how much in reserves you have to put in. So if she's, a lot of businesses plan out 10 years down the line, then all of a sudden a group of regulators comes and bam says, well, the requirements that you put up X amount of dollars in reserves, we're going to have to increase that by 30%. Well, guys, that hadn't been planned for in the 10-year plan. So Barb is an example of what she's doing, looking out for companies and trying to advise them that if you're not careful, the thing you think is going to be predictable and happen is not going to happen. And Steve, go on to your point about why it's changed so much, what the internet has done, what more information has done. That's an excellent point you were making there before, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, you can
I,
read my mind because I don't think I finished that statement. But go ahead, and we have some other comments. Go ahead.
Well, because so much more information is available to you. 20 years ago, the internet was just getting cracked, and you didn't have the access to the current information you had that changes so quickly. Now, everybody can keep up on all these issues, and so it's much easier to keep up. And it's kind of interesting. People saying, well, I don't want to fool with politics. I just don't like the tone of it. And yet, it's so much easier for you to stay attuned to so many of these issues on the internet. It's a lot easier to stay up to date. You had to fight a lot harder. In the old days, you'd maybe hire a consultant or a lobbyist, someone like that, to look after your interest. But internally, you can do so much of that yourself, do it cheaper if you want to take the time to do it. And so I think that social media, the internet, has opened up more opportunities both to inform you, but also let someone undermine you. So it's even more important today to stay current than it was in the past.
Okay, so Barbara is now in real estate, by the way. She just posted that, and she asked another, I think, really interesting question. Internet is always of interest. How do we know what to believe? So, within the framework of, say, public policy and economic development and business, if you could try to answer that question.
Well, that's a excellent question, and there is so much out there. And as you say, what do you believe? There's a lot of good information out there, but there's a lot of tainted information or information that you think, oh my gosh, this really affects me when it really doesn't. So it's hard to weave through it all. I think that some people in the past didn't get involved in maybe their local chamber of commerce, a local interest group that affected them. Maybe Barbara's in the real estate business. I live in Baton Rouge, where there's a very active East Baton Rouge Parish real estate group, a private group that gets together to watch these issues very closely. So I think tying into other people that share your interests, that share your business, is very important today, more so than it was in the past. In the past, you say, well, I'll let the Chamber of Commerce just look after my interests on a state level. Well, now they're competing interests. And so therefore, finding a group that you trust or other people that share your views and sharing that information and trying to get a consensus as to what's true or what has a factual backup. So excellent question by Barbara. Again, more important to see who's in my framework, who's in my mindset, who do I trust, whether it be local people in my parish, whether it be an elected official, a city councilman I can call on to ask for advice. But you've got to find a simile of someone or groups that you trust that you deal with because, as you say, if you don't, it's going to be very, very confusing for you. You're going to go off on a track because of erroneous information that just can lead you astray, quite frankly, Steve.
Okay, so James Harold Lacombe Jr. Says, interesting to say the least. We have another comment here, if I might put it up. Mr. Temple Fugate. Um, what about the issues of legislators voting on or making laws that regulate their own businesses?
Yeah, that's a tough one because the rules are not as precise as they should be. I think if there's a direct now, how wide is the net, Steve? I'm an attorney. You can say that laws affecting the court system would affect me. So should I recuse myself back in the time when I was a state senator? That's probably a pretty wide net that wouldn't affect my decision. But when you get down to the fact that you're regulating a specific industry, you're representing a specific business that you do yourself, then there are questions you've got to deal with in terms of recusing yourself. I guess if there's a bond, there's money going to a particular road project, let's say, in a parish in Louisiana, and I'm in the construction business in that parish, I ought to recuse myself in a vote like that. Quite frankly, in the legislature, very few legislators recuse themselves on votes along these lines. We don't have a strict code of ethics involving the legislature like you do in Congress. You've got probably a stronger code in Congress than you do in Louisiana. And that's
Really?
something we got to look at in terms of strengthening those conflict of interest decisions that right now are pretty loose in Louisiana.
I thought that under Governor Jindal that the ethics reform was going to make a major difference. And you're saying that, in your opinion, we still have a long way to go.
You're right. Under the General Administration, that was going to be the golden
Gold standard.
bailiwick of his
Mhm.
concerns, and nothing really was done with it. It just wasn't effective, and so often there's other ways you can get affected. We've got some oversight groups involving real estate, lawyers, the medical profession, but often from the state perspective, they're not funded properly, or you don't have qualified people running those operations as a political appointee. So it's not only the rules on the road in terms of how you're to be affected. You also have to see that those enforcing those rules are doing the proper job. We've had some weaknesses here in terms of conflicts involving nursing homes and a number of other entities in Louisiana. The cosmetology board seems to be in the news a lot with lots of controversy. And so, and I guess then the question you raised is who's watching the watchers? And we don't,
Mhm.
again, have very much of an oversight over who's watching the watchers. You take insurance. I was insurance commissioner for a long, long time. Well, who's being sure that the insurance commissioner is effectively doing his or her job in enforcing the rules and regulations? Many other states have consumer protection groups or oversight groups that watch these kinds of things. We don't in Louisiana. We pretty much turn the regulators loose and let them, their only time of judgment is election time, which is it's good to have election time. But again, we saw a major election in New Orleans just last week where they elected a new sheriff, major city council people, and I think the turnout was, and it was a pretty hotly contested election, and the turnout was less than 30%, if I remember correctly. So public engagement and oversight at elections, you get a 50% turnout, and that's a big, big deal. Remember, it only takes 50% plus one to get elected. That means in a big turnout election, maybe 25% of the people are electing those who govern our lives, who set these rules and regulations, and set penalties if you don't apply. So again, it goes back to engagement. Voting, number one. Number two, dealing with a group that you trust to, and number three, just generally staying involved, because again, I make the point I said at the first of this comment. Maybe you don't want to mess with politics, but no matter what your business, politics is going to mess with you. So you need to gear up and be aware of that, much more so in 2021 than we saw, say, back in 1990, Steve.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have some comments from YouTube. Also, we have comments from, it looks like LinkedIn. Just so the viewers know, we're actually streaming this into 10 different locations, I believe the number is. 10 different locations on social media. Uh, the expanse of being able to do this with new technology is just extraordinary. Not just Facebook, like Jim and I used to do, but now to all different forms of social media. So if you have a question, pardon me, I'm sorry. If those people who have a question would love to hear from you, just go ahead and post your question or your comment, and we will post it on the screen, just like it is below.
And
Uh,
Steve, I might give a few more examples if you allow
sure.
me to do so about government involvement that just happened here recently. I saw just yesterday the New Orleans City Council got into a very cantankerous decision about zoning. Most of us know the Garden District uptown in New Orleans is all the wonderful homes that have so much character and class, and there's efforts to bring in low income housing where you have as much as, say, fourplexes amongst this area out here. And a lot of local citizens are concerned about that. They don't want to lower the value of their particular property. They want low income housing to be there for people that need it. But at what expense are they going to have to pay? That's just one decision of the city council dealing with an issue that affects people on both sides of the spectrum. But the gambling casino resolution, resolution, the election that took place over in St. Tammany Parish, millions were spent by those who thought the referendum was going to pass very easily. But I think a lot of local businesses said, wait a minute, how's this going to affect, number one, our business? If I've got a restaurant, do I want a casino coming in with 7 or 8 other restaurants to compete with me on a level to where there is funding that I can't get a hold of? I'm not involved in something like that. And so that was an issue. Then, of course, the fact of how healthy is it to have more gambling coming in. And voters overwhelmingly got involved with a very high turnout and rejected that proposition. So that's one to show you. Another example would be our bond commission. The bond commission is the state commission that approves borrowing. If you have to borrow funds for the state borrows a lot of money. As the Secretary of State, I had to sign all those bonds for years, and I was very integrally involved in these details. There was a large bond issue. I'm not sure what it was to fund, but it was like maybe $200 or $300 million. Chase, the largest bank in this country, gave the low bid. That they were going to charge the state less than anyone else. But Chase has decided not to loan money to gun manufacturers. So our Louisiana legislature came in and said, we're going to disqualify Chase. We're going to ignore them. Even though they're the low bid, the cheapest, we're not going to take them. So the largest bank in the country with the low bid was opt out. Now, you're paying a price. Maybe you believe very strongly that the Second Amendment goes to not doing business with anyone that takes it beyond what you want, but you pay a price. We as taxpayers are going to pay more money because of the fact that we didn't get the low bid. So I'm just saying that lots of these decisions affect so many things in terms of what we do. And that's why it's so important that the average businessman or woman who wants to grow their business has got to pay attention to how these public issues directly affect them.
Okay, those people who are watching, please go ahead and like the post, the video, and share it with your friends. We'd love to have more people to know that we're doing these programs. Would definitely appreciate it. We have a comment here from James Harold Lacombe Jr. Let me see about posting it. It's kind of it says fake news is so prevalent in this digital age we live in now. Thank you guys for being so transparent and informative. Have notifications set to follow you and this platform. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, and
Uh,
we're picking up on James, Steve, what he said, you see, is the comment you made before. You couldn't have programs like this 15, 20 years ago that go into some depth. The evening news may give you a little blip. You do something on talk radio along these lines, but this interactive way we can take these questions and lay out this information, and hopefully those watching us know, understand, and feel like it's nonpartisan. I don't have any axe to grind. I'm just giving you my experience over all these years as someone who's been in public life, now is out, but a close observer. And Steve, you disseminate so much great information through Bayou Buzz and through programs like this. So it's great to have these platforms, but I think, as James pointed out, you've got to keep your guard up about the fake news too, and you just can't pick and choose what you believe. You've got to try to keep a neutral balance to get this information in. Then once you have heard it all, make up your mind, but at least do it on a fact basis, on not just a fake news, but on a factual basis that you accept. And that's very, very important. And I appreciate James's comments there, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you, James. So I know we want to cut this short. I know that I made that promise that we would cut this, make it no more than a half hour. So the two areas that I want to deal with right now, if you don't mind, and you touched upon one, and that deals with I want to say the trillion dollars that are coming in, the billions of dollars that are coming in due to the infrastructure. Um, I mean, there are a tremendous amount of policy issues that are going to be involved with the state and local businesses getting this in just um, treasure chests of money. And so I'm just wondering, uh, do you have any recommendations for, say, the Louisiana legislature in terms of, and other agencies in the state, what they may be able to do to, I guess, maybe serve their constituents better with this inflow of money, especially given the fact that Mitch Landrieu is in charge of the entire program, which is absolutely amazing. Go ahead.
Well, and you're right. We're glad to have someone like former Mayor Landrieu and others that are Cedric Richmond, who's very close to the president dealing with Louisiana. But still, when Congress passed the rules and regulations, they don't favor Louisiana, number one. Number two, when you're dealing with these large sums of money, there are often a number of rules and regulations that you have to follow, and some businesses may decide it's just not worth it for them. The state is sitting on a trove of cash that have come in because of these recent hurricanes. And I'm told that the rules and regulations of getting some of this money or applying for business is just so overwhelming that if you don't know what you're doing, you can get bogged down in the red tape. They say it's just not worth it. We're going to have to hire all kinds of consultants to try to help us get through all of the morass of rules, the umbrella around us. It's just not worth that to do for us. So those are some of the problems. And you ask what the legislature can do. Try to make it easy for small businesses to fill out the forms and get their application in and be reviewed. It just shouldn't be. It shouldn't take all the red tape that we often are involved in. I've filled out help people fill out applications. I've dealt with some insurance issues where people want to make a complaint or file application. And the paperwork that you have to go through and gather is just overwhelming. It's just not that simple. Quite frankly, I've helped some people on some veterans issues here regularly, and the Veterans Administration's done a real good job. It's just a form you can fill out over the internet. You're told very specifically that, if you give false information, you're subject to major penalties, criminal penalties. But it's very simple. It's something you do on one page, and it works very, very quickly. And so some agencies will work that way. Others don't do that. They just pile on the red tape to maybe cover themselves as the money goes out. So that's the decision you've got to look at. And that's where it's good to have an association. if you're in a particular business that has an association, a private association, and contractors do, the transportation, the road people do, the real estate people do, obviously the lawyers do, that look at these issues, look at these opportunities, and try to help you get through all the morass of the rules and regulations. So the legislature can help us limit as much as possible the red tape you've got to go through.
Okay, you hear that, legislators? You've got a job to do. One last topic, and let me just give a little background, if I might. After the devastating tornadoes in Kentucky from the weekend, I engaged in a conversation with some people on social media about the major issue, I believe, of global warming and the man participation, if any, in heating up the globe, which is, I believe, again, and 97% of the experts and scientists, at least I'm following what they have to say, and what they're saying is that that we are actually contributing to the problem, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, etc. That's what they're saying, and because that's the consensus, I've chosen to believe that. So my question is this: I mean, here in Louisiana, we're in really a delicate situation. I mean, we have hurricanes, we have major hurricanes. We had one this year. I mean, we're trying to recover. There's an issue of FEMA. There's an issue of whether or not we're going to have money, insurance money. And I bring this up because you're being a former insurance commissioner. Are we going to have insurance to be able to pay for that? For people to be able to insure their properties down in, say, Grand Isles, down in Cocodrie, down in Houma, Thibodaux, etc. So
Well,
public policy in this respect is critical. Go ahead.
we've been complaining about that here in Louisiana for many, many years, and I certainly was deeply concerned about it when I served as insurance commissioner. I went to Congress and testified and said, look, the states can't do this alone. There's got to be a national response, not after the event, but building up for the event, having a reserve of dollars available that can be there as an umbrella cover to protect people once these events happen. Because as you said, Steve, they're going to continue to happen. My idea was, and Senator John Breaux, when he was in the U.S. Senate, joined me in a very detailed plan we put forth that created a National Disaster Act. What it would do would be to say, okay, let's build up funds both in the state level and the federal level to be able to anticipate in advance. Don't go through all the red tape afterwards. Let's have it there for you. And it would be a private sector type response. If I have my home, maybe I pay an extra 1% on my insurance premiums into a state fund. And what the fund would do, once my private insurance covered me up to a certain level, let's say $500,000, the state fund then might cover you with the money that they've gathered, I say up to $1 million. Then anything over that, the federal government would step in on. So it would be a private funded reinsurance program called a National Disaster Act, is what we called it. The Senate in the United States passed the act that Senator Breaux led the fight on, and the House Representatives bogged it down. Then a new administration came in, and it just kind of languished. We had a comment earlier from Tim Temple, I think, here, who's an insurance executive, ran for insurance commissioner last time. He's very active in pushing a National Disaster Act for insurance. So it's going to take that kind of response, Steve. Kentucky can't do it alone. They've been decimated. Now, it's not good news, but what we're seeing is it used to be just hurricanes in the Gulf South, and maybe you might have a wildfire or two out west. Now we're seeing the Midwest being devastated. We've seen what's happened in Nebraska and Kentucky. We're seeing flooding up in Missouri, for example. We're seeing these wildfires continue, the tornadoes. All of this is affecting states all over the country. Very few states have not been hit in some way. So I guess my point is the momentum for a National Disaster Act is better today than it ever has been before. And I hope we have some of our Louisiana members of Congress who are going to take this ball and run with it and really try to push this response. Again, we can't do it alone. As you said, global warming, icebergs up in the north are coming down and raising the water level here in Louisiana. We're seeing that happening right now. There's going to be more and more problems. We cannot do it state by state. It's got to be a National Disaster Act. And again, the time has never been more right than to have something like that now, Steve.
Absolutely. Barbara Bain has asked one other question, and it says, tough deal, National Disaster Act regarding FEMA. Please confirm. Again, we're really having some major issues. I remember 10 years ago, roughly, the Southern delegation, as well as I think it was Mary Landrieu, had talked about the fact that we were not going to be able to get insurance for some of these properties. And now, of course, we have. I mean, it's become even more of a problem because of the massive amount of disasters around the world.
Well, you're right, and some tough decisions are going to have to be made. Unfortunately, and I don't want to get people riled up on this, but we may have a few small areas on the periphery of the wetlands that may not be able to survive this as the old timers stay. They want to live and not move, and I understand that. But as their children grow, they're going to have to consider opportunities otherwise, because it's tough when you're living in one of these zones and you get pounded every other year and you're struggling because of prices just to commercial fish, for example, or do some way to make a living. It may not be the right place for you. So reluctantly, a few areas may not be there today. Now, some people are saying that 30 years from now, 40 years from now, New Orleans is going to be like Venice. You're going to go through the French Quarter in a gondola, and that is not completely out of the question. One of the most startling things for tourists is to be on Bourbon Street or somewhere in the quarter, and you look way up in the air and see a ship go by because the quarter is about 8 feet lower than the Mississippi River. So we're holding so far on that, but we've spent billions and billions of dollars to do it. And we want to do it because we're a national treasure here. We're the most northern of the Caribbean states, quite frankly, Steve. And so we want to protect our way of living. But the cost is going to be high, number one. Number two, it can't be just a Louisiana decision. It's going to have to be a national decision where states all over the country who are affected need to get together and deal with this issue on a national level. FEMA is one part of the problem. That's just one part, I say, the response. But FEMA can't do it. FEMA is constantly out of money. The rates they've raised right now make it almost unaffordable. So if we do this national act, we can get rates more affordable, quite frankly, and help states all over the country. I think it's very, very important, and I think the timing is right now, Steve.
Just to follow on that last point, if I might, and that is that in South Louisiana we have two major industries. One, of course, is oil and gas, and the other, of course, of the fisheries. And so, you know, if there's a problem with getting insurance, that means not being able to rebuild. That means not being able to serve or service the oil and gas industry, the fishing industry. I mean, you talk about a hit on economic development for the state of Louisiana.
Well, no doubt about it, it's going to be devastating if we are not allowed to give this response. As you said, that was my argument on the settlement involving the wetlands going all the way back to Earl Long on the oil and gas, where the oil and gas comes from. We get a pittance of the severance tax and oil and gas going out into the Gulf. We get just a little bit within our limit, but we're the ones that take care of all those workers that go offshore. We educate their children. We give them all the state benefits. They go offshore and make all this money that goes to the federal government, and we get very little in return. So Louisiana got shortchanged. We don't have time today, Steve. I can give you a lot of history. I've taught Louisiana history at both Tulane and LSU, and I can tell you some stories about how President Eisenhower was going to make a deal with Louisiana, giving us 50% of all the oil and gas revenue offshore, going out like 12 or 14 miles. It would have meant billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars to Louisiana. At one time, Congressman Billy Tozan, when he was congressman, I figured that if we'd taken that deal from Eisenhower back in the 50s, we wouldn't have any state income tax today. We wouldn't have any property tax today. We'd had so much money coming in. We didn't make that deal because Leander Perez down in Plaquemine Parish urged the governor to say, no, we want the whole thing. We want 100%. We got greedy, and therefore we lost off tremendously. So now we're just trying to hang on, Steve. And it's going to be a tough job to hang on, as you mentioned, global warming, more national disasters. So again, we've got to decide priority-wise. What do we want to protect, and what are we willing to pay, and how much is the federal government going to help? And those are legislative decisions, but it affects every listener here watching this show today in terms of your future and the future of your children. Again, you may not want to mess with politics, but politics, one way or the other, is going to mess with you. So you need to get involved. That's my final message to you, Steve.
Okay, and thank you for the message. Absolutely. So, those people who are watching, please go ahead and share. This will be up on social media, and we'll cut this edit and put it up in different locations, including snippets on Bayou Buzz. We have, I think it is a very broad topic, but there are a lot of specific issues that we can talk about in the future with other guests. So, Jim Brown, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Again, those people, please share. And I'm going to end the program right now by just really hitting a button and saying goodbye to a number of Facebook locations, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Steve. Take